talking about teams. So we're going to talk about today not just how teams should work, but how the tools help us work within those teams. So before we get into it, there's a really good quote from a book now that's about a decade and a half old, which says, "If it hurts, do it more frequently and put the pain forward." This book is specifically about, the title is continuous delivery or continuous integration, but really it applies to so many things in software engineering. And I think the fun thing about a quote like this, right, is it's kind of counterintuitive. If something hurts, why do it more frequently? But by doing something frequently, you force yourself to solve those pain points. And that's really what I think the meat of talking about working in a team effectively is. How do we solve pain points that we encounter on, if not daily, frequent basis? And if we solve those pain points, it becomes easier to do things. This will apply to testing, team meetings, running code, working with Git, just about everything that you could find painful. Doing that iteration more frequently helps solve the problem. So with that, we're going to start off with size and team dynamics of Scrum. So remember that when we're talking about things, software engineering is now a team sport. Arguably, it has always been a team sport, but more than ever, the hero programmer, the rock star programmer, this doesn't exist anymore. There are very few projects in which a sole engineer can have the same kind of impact or longevity. If we're talking about raising the quality and functionality of software, right, we can't do this through an individual and we can't do this through tools alone. We're going to need to work on team dynamics and processes to help this. Importantly for all of you, a successful software engineering career is not just programming chops. It is the ability to work on a team, the ability to communicate, the ability to do things like write documentation and collaborate with others. If you have the opportunity to take a class where you get to do things like write a design documentation or participate in design reviews, whether they are more technical or more visual, you should absolutely take that opportunity because those things contribute to the team as a whole. We've quoted Fred Brooks many times, but here's another sort of short and sweet one. There are no winners on a losing team and no losers on a winning team, which says, right, if the team succeeds, you all succeed together. And this applies everything from getting the release out the door, a startup going public, customer feedback, all of the team contributes to that. And I'll add that it's not just the team itself or not just the engineers itself. It's the developers, it's the company, it's your managers, and so on. So one way that we could look at how software teams have grown is through the example of video games. Of course, realistically, over the past 40 years, this applies to more than just video games. You might, look at Space Invaders, full-scale original arcade console built by one person. Super Mario Bros., you have 6 people. Sonic the Hedgehog in the late 1990s, a team of 30 people. And through the 2000s to today, in particular with, blockbuster video games, development team sizes explode. So Resident Evil 6 in 2013 reportedly 600. Red Dead Redemption 2 in 2018, reportedly 1,200 folks as the development team size. Red Dead Redemption 2 is, by some accounts, the largest console AAA game ever built in terms of download size, reportedly development team size. But the idea here, right, is that when you start working with teams that size, not all of these folks, when you get to 600, 1,200, are probably engineers. They are artists, designers, managers, testers, story writers, everything. But you can't resolve conflicts just on sort of talking to each other, process, code tools, all of those things factor in. So, if team matters, or if team size matters, how should we think about organizing our teams? And really what I'd say is, how do we think about organizing the teams on a level at which you can really accomplish the work as a small team? So plan and document, sort of suggests that this extensive documentation approach depends on an experienced sort of central manager, right? Someone is leading that work. It typically tends to be more top-down, where at each process, your managers are directing that work. And if you get to teams beyond 100, right, you probably have managers directing managers towards parts of that process. If we're talking about agile teams, how should we break that down into a simpler way? And is there alternative to just hierarchy where the manager is the one who runs the project. Obviously, in any large organization, even with Agile, you will still have a manager, right? Agile is not an excuse that as an engineer, you don't have a manager. But day to day, the idea of Agile is small teams that have a little bit more autonomy that can work more cohesively within a team. So we typically call these Scrum teams. And the rule of thumb for a Scrum team is the 2 pizza model, which sort of suggests ideally 4 to 9 people. That working model sort of depends on the particulars of your project and organization. As an engineer, you might be listed on a team that gets larger. But the way to think about this is your day-to-day work will be with a small, hopefully cohesive group of people. And we call these Scrum because it's inspired by the rugby team model. And the idea here is to have frequent short meetings. The more frequent, the shorter, the better. Typically, these Scrum meetings are also referred to as daily stand-ups, but the idea here is 15 minutes every day, same time and place. This comes originally from the Agile software book. And I'll make a point that one of the reasons that people do refer to these as daily stand-ups is because when they originally started happening, people were standing for the duration of the meeting. And it's not just that standing happens to be healthy, but if you are standing, it sort of forces you to think about the whole process of the meeting to be efficient with your time before going on. And so, sort of simple human tricks can really help with that. So what do daily Scrum meetings look like? 3 really simple questions. You can apply these to all sorts of projects, but they get to the gist. So what have you done since yesterday? What are you planning to do today? And are there any impediments or stumbling blocks? And the goal here is that every individual can sort of speak up and identify what they need to accomplish the work. In a healthy Scrum team, it's really okay to say that as an individual programmer, you are stuck on something. I've been reading the documentation and I've been encountering a bug. Or I wrote this code and, I can't debug why the test fails sometimes. Those are seemingly simple things that bringing up in a Scrum meeting really helps, because if you've been focused on an issue or stuck on an issue for too long, that's a sign that your team members should come in and help. But 3 simple questions apply to all sorts of daily meetings. These meetings and team dynamics are made most effective when we designate a couple Scrum roles beyond just engineers. So if we have sort of a 2 pizza-sized team, one of the roles is a team member that we typically call the Scrum Master. And the general idea is that the Scrum Master is sort of the buffer for the team against the external world. They represent the team, maybe to other parts of the business. They keep track of the team's overall progress throughout the week or the iteration cycle, which we typically call a sprint. And they're the person who is sort of enforcing that things are kept on task. They're the one whose job is to step in and say, hey, if you have a blocker, I'm going to go in and help you fix that. They're not your software engineering manager. In some cases, they could be that person, but really they're a team member who is also contributing each day to doing the work. And subtle but important is the reason that this is effective, right? If this is a peer who is leading that daily work, it is easier to build trust and rapport with them. You're not sort of taking direction from someone who doesn't understand the code. An effective Scrum manager is in the weeds with you every day. They just happen to dedicate some of their time to doing that work of leading and organizing the team. Pretty much every Scrum team has a second important role, which is called the product owner. And importantly, this is someone who's not the Scrum Master. This could be a developer on the team. Sometimes it's not a developer on the team, but they represent the voice of the customer and they help prioritize user stories. It's really helpful that the product owner and Scrum Master are 2 separate people, because some of the tensions can exist, right? When customers have certain needs, but you have development priorities, having 2 people whose job is sort of by design to represent each of those priorities, they shouldn't necessarily be in conflict with each other in an ideal world, but if they are, you have 2 folks whose goal is to represent that. And of course, in any business and any team meeting, with any more than just one person, conflicts do happen. So how do you handle differences in technical direction? There's not one right answer, but there are many wrong answers. And there's a couple sort of general principles that you should think about. First, we'd say is identify the items in which everyone agrees. Starting out with agreements generally makes it easier to make progress. And also, you might discover that you're closer together than you are further apart. It helps the stage for what is most important. And in particular here, right, if the things that you agree on are your top line priorities, that makes it easier to decide how to resolve the later conflicts. Each side should articulate the arguments of the other side, even if you don't agree with them. It's really easy to dismiss someone's argument, but if you take the time to try and argue that position, to sort of play devil's advocate, so to speak, you better understand that argument. And by doing so, you typically come away with a better sense of what is actually important in that dynamic. This also helps avoid confusion and reduces any potential assumptions that may arise. Two strategies from industry for resolving conflicts. These both come from Intel. They're not the only ones, but they're worth thinking about. So Intel has a model that they call constructive confrontation, which says that if you as an individual have a strong technical disagreement about the direction of a project, the implementation of something, you are obligated to bring it up with your manager, which is to say, if you see something that you think is going to go wrong, if you think it is going to cause problems, it is your obligation as a team member to raise that issue. And phrasing it this way helps empower you as an individual to not think about it as challenging your team member, as not going against them necessarily, but as helping the team as a whole. And that's a really important thing to be able to do. The second thing is disagree and commit, which also comes from Intel. This really captures the idea that once a decision has made, you embrace the decision as the team. And the way that you sort of say this is, I disagree, but I'm going to help even if I don't agree. This comes up perhaps all the time. It could be something as simple as you wanted to use a different library tool in a project, but the team voted for some reason or decided that they're using something else. It could be a different technical direction. Basically, it says, even if you lose an argument, you're still a member of the team. It is your duty to help push the team and the project forward. Conflict resolution is not just a team dynamic, right? But this happens in your personal lives. And really the way to think about it is treating this as a process and having a set of tools makes that work a little bit easier. Summary of Scrum teams. The idea is give teams power to be self-organizing with a little bit of structure. So daily stand-up meetings. Scrum teams typically work in sprints that are about 2 to 4 weeks, but the particulars are not as important as the overall healthy iterative process that exists on a team. And one really important suggestion, especially for class projects, but especially for teams as well that are going to be around for a long time, is to swap out your Scrum Master and Product Owner so that everyone on the team has a chance to experience those roles. It helps growth as an engineer. It also helps ensure that different people's working styles, their blind spots are all addressed over time by working on the team that way.